Thank you. All right, so today we are here to talk about the understanding the impacts of the EU Eco-Design Directive for apparel and textile manufacturers. This has been one of the pieces of legislation that we've gotten, I think, the most questions about. So I'm expecting a very lively session today. So thank you for being here, whether it's your morning or your afternoon or your evening. Before I introduce all of the speakers, I want to just give a little bit of context for this webinar. So this webinar is part of a series that we've done in the aftermath of publishing the Apparel Suppliers Guide to Sustainability legislation that came out in July of, the second iteration came out in July of 2024. The first iteration came out in July of 2023. And it's a resource that we created, and I'm going to tell you a bit about who was involved in creating it in a minute. But it's a resource that we created to enable suppliers who are predominantly operating outside of the global north to better understand how recent and upcoming global sustainability legislation will impact them. The report really is a first of its kind in the sense that it was entirely manufacturer-led. It's a manufacturer-led public policy resource for manufacturers, in many ways by manufacturers. And we hope that this resource will build and inspire more manufacturer collaboration and agency within policy discourse, because we really feel like manufacturer voices are missing in this space. Next slide, please, Macy. So this legislative guide, which I've just mentioned, really was a collective effort. It was commissioned and led by, and we have representatives from some of these companies here with us today. So I'll ask you to wave if I mention your name. But the resource was commissioned and led by Crystal Group, and these are all manufacturing companies, Diamond Fabrics, which is part of Sapphire Group, Lenzing, and from Lenzing we have Daniela here today, if you want to wave, and I'll introduce you again properly in a minute, Daniela. Pactics Group, and from Pactics we have Maha here with us today, if you want to wave, Maha. Poetic Gem, and from Poetic Gem we have Kavita, and Poetic Gem is part of PDS Group. Shahi Exports, and Simple Approach, which is also part of PDS Group. Sourcery, and from Sourcery, I think we have Crispin and Amelia here with us today. And the project was also supported by Transformers Foundation, and I'm here as a representative of Transformers Foundation, supporting with the project management together with my colleague Jessie. And it was also supported by GIZ Fabric. Oh, we've got Gori here from Shahi Exports as well. And Kritika. So the report was written by the Remedy Project. They were the legal brains behind the report or the guide, and they work with governments, civil society, law enforcement, and the private sector to translate the UN guiding principles on business and human rights into practice. So it really was, creating this guide was an iterative process in the sense that we had the lawyers kind of say, well, this is what the legislation says, and then the manufacturers kind of thinking through, well, what would this mean for a manufacturing company, and then back and forth until we got to the guide that you can now download online. I want to share a quick disclaimer. All of the opinions expressed in this webinar or report, especially on the manufacturing side, are that of the collective and shouldn't be attributed to individuals or to spokespeople. I mean, very practically, we had the manufacturers participating in this project have kindly agreed to share their knowledge and insights, and they've discussed at length, I think, over the last 7 months or more than that now, about those insights. But, you know, practically one person has to be the one to say them. So please be mindful of that. Next slide, please, Macy. So if you would like to download the guide that I've just been talking about, you can use that first QR code on the left. If you would like to support future fact sheets, you can use the QR code in the middle. And I mentioned that this is part of a webinar series that we've done in the aftermath of launching this report. I think this is the fourth or fifth one. And we have one more coming up on the 18th of February, and it's the final one. And we've had so many questions in all of these webinars that we've done so far. We did one on the CSDDD. We did one on the USFLPA. We did one on the textile strategy. Now we're doing the eco design. And so for our last webinar in this series, we thought what we'd do is go back to all of the open questions that we didn't have time to answer the first time around, and to really do a session focused on that. And we'll be joined by speakers who have presented on all of the various pieces of legislation that I've just mentioned. So it will really be, instead of a presentation, a chance for attendees to just come and ask questions. Next slide, please, Macy. And so I have mentioned already the manufacturers who are here joining us today, who have led and supported the project. But we're also joined by Maeva from Coast 361. And actually, Coast 361 is a consultancy agency. And they work with brands, and they work with manufacturers, and they work on collaborative projects that bring together brands and manufacturers. But the reason that we invited them here today is because they are doing a lot of work on the EU Eco Design Directive. And one of the pieces of work that they are doing is they are representing the European Flax and Hemp Alliance on the Technical Secretariat of the European Product Environment Footprint Category Rules for Apparel and Footwear. So they are actually representing producers in the flax and hemp space in this technical policy space. And so we thought they would be very well positioned to help explain some of the basics of this piece of legislation to the audience here today and the manufacturers. And again, we encourage you to download the fact sheet from the guide itself. So thank you, Maeva, for being with us. Then Daniela from Lenzing Group, who waved briefly already, will be sharing a bit about Lenzing's experience in trying to practically prepare for the impacts of the EU Eco Design Directive. So we'll hear, after we hear from Maeva giving us the 101, we'll hear from Daniela and Lenzing's experience. And then we will hear last, but certainly not least, from Iris of Renoon. And Renoon is an organization that is giving companies the tools that they need to track, measure, and launch for the digital product passport. So again, a very interesting perspective, a very practical perspective, and we'll be hearing from her very practically what she's seeing. And Renoon works with brands, but also especially with manufacturers, and on how to support in their preparations for the digital product passport. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. Okay, the disclaimers I've actually already done, but from a housekeeping perspective, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. You can put them as we go along. After we get through the presentations, we'll open for Q&A. And as I mentioned, our final webinar on the 18th of February will go through questions that we didn't have time to get to. So even if there seems like there's a lot of questions and we're not getting to them, please, I encourage you to put the questions in there anyway. Okay. Then with that, I am going to hand over to Maeva, and I'm going to ask all the other speakers who are not speaking right now to turn off your cameras and your mics. And Maeva, I leave it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me in this webinar. And let's go for this really interesting piece of legislation. So we can go, Macy, please. Okay, thank you. I will go over the first two slides very quickly. I just want to give you a general regulatory context before diving into the ESPR. So I won't go through the entire history of European regulation, but a good starting point is the European Green Deal in 2019. The European Green Deal is a set of measures focused on green transition, with the main goal to achieve climate neutrality in 2050. And all the topics you have on this slide are very important, but I just would like to focus on circular economy this morning. The circularity is how we can move away from our current linear model to produce, consume, and discard, and how we can reduce the consumption of resources and especially non-renewable sources, and how we can reduce the waste, how we can keep product and resources in the loop as long as possible. And according to a report from Circle Economy, our worldwide economy is circular at only 7%, and our textile industry is circular at only 0.3%. So circularity is one of the targets of the Green Deal and the ESPR because it's a really important tool to achieve the climate neutrality. So next, please, Macy. Thank you. So don't worry, I will not go in detail into all this regulation. It's just to give you a big picture of the regulatory pressure we are facing. And all these regulations are impacting or will impact the textile sector. And it's not an exhaustive list. But the good news is for some of these regulations, they have some common requirement, like the need of traceability, the need to calculate the environmental footprint. So it means working on these topics will allow to comply with different piece of regulations. So next, please. So now we can go into the ESPR, that is the regulation we are interested in today. So here are the main requirements of the ESPR. ESPR is for Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulations. And main requirements are to reduce the impact of the product placed on the European market, to define minimum criteria the product must meet, must respect to access the European market. The digital product passport, called DPP, I guess this is the requirement you've probably heard the most about. It's a tool to gather upstream and downstream data for different purposes. So you can provide information to the final consumers in order to help them to compare the product and to make better choices. It's a way to gather information that can be shared between all supply chain players to increase the circularity of the product. And it's a way to give an access to the authorities in order they can guarantee the compliance of the product before they enter into the market. And the last requirement is the ban on destroying unsold products. So next, please. Here is an official communication from the European Commission, so maybe you already seen it before. This is the list of the minimum criteria we just talked about. In blue, you can see the criteria linked to the production, how we use the resources, the environmental footprint of the product, the content of the product. In green, these are the criteria linked to the use of the product, how we can increase the lifespan of the product, working on their reusability, repairability, or durability, for example. And in orange, you can see the criteria linked to the end of life of the product. So how we can recycle, how we can recover the material, keeping in mind the objective of the circularity, that is to keep the resource in the loop. So next, please. Who is affected by the ESPR? In terms of businesses, the entire value chain is impacted by the regulation, but at different level. The first to be impacted are the entities placing the goods on the European market. And when we say placed on the market, it means a product is placed on the market after customs release. So in most cases, brands are the entities placing the good on the market, so they are responsible for the ESPR compliance. But you, as manufacturers, you can be the one placing the goods on the market. It depends of the agreement and Incoterms you decided with your customers. So it's important for you to identify the cases where you are the one placing the goods on the market, because it means you are responsible for the compliance. Importers, distributors, retailers, online marketplace are affected by the ESPR as well, but they mainly ensure that the product they sell are compliant to the regulation. So next, please. So now in terms of products, which products are covered by the ESPR? You need to know that ESPR, it's not a textile-specific regulation. It will cover different sectors. So first of all, there are general requirements that are common for all product categories. And then there are specific requirements, different requirements for each product categories. The European Commission will not work on all sectors and all products in the same time. So a list of priority sectors has been defined, and textile is in this list. So it means textile sector will be one of the first to get its delegated act. So next, please. So what does it mean in terms of timeline? So the ESPR came into effect last summer. So it's a very recent regulation, and that's why a lot of things are still unclear. But several tools will help to clarify the regulation. And the first one is a working plan expected by April 2025. In this working plan, we will see the clear list of all products covered by the ESPR. And the second tool are the delegated acts expected by 2026. The European Commission is currently organizing the Eco-Design Forum. Eco-Design Forum is like a big working group with different textile value chain stakeholders and textile experts, and they are working together to build the delegated acts. Once the delegated acts will be ready, textile product will need to comply with the ESPR by 2027-28. So next slide, please, Macy.
Can I ask you, Maeva, just to clarify, what is a delegated act?
Delegated act is a piece of the legislation. It means that, as I said, the ESPR will cover different sectors. So there are general requirements common for all the sectors and all the product categories. And then the European Commission will say, okay, for textile, we cannot work only with the general requirement. We have to create some specific requirement for textile, specific requirement for electronic products, and so on. So delegated act is a new piece of the legislation that will bring very specific requirement to the sector. So in 2026, they will have delegated acts specific to the textile sector with only requirement textile product must comply with. I hope it's more clearer. Okay, so next slide. When we talk about regulations, one of the first questions is about the sanctions. For ESPR, only one sanction to keep in mind. Non-compliant product cannot be placed on the European market. So once again, as manufacturers, it's really important for you to identify if for some orders, if for some customers, you are the one placing the good on the market. Because as you can see, it's not a small responsibility. If you are in charge of the compliance, and if the product cannot enter in the market, you will be responsible for that. So it's really important for you to identify if you are the one placing the goods on the market. Next slide, please. Let's have a short focus on the DPP. It is one of the ESPR requirements, and as we say, the objective is to gather upstream and downstream information for different purposes, including informing the final consumers and increasing the circularity of the products. So here is an example of data that can be included in the DPP. There are some upstream data, downstream data, information dedicated to the end consumers, like the material composition, the environmental impact, the use and care instruction, for example. And as we said, it's a way to provide information to the downstream players. So for example, recyclers, it will allow them to access to data that will help them to better sort and better recycle the product. So as you can see, the entire value chain is affected by the regulation and by the DPP, from raw material producer to end-of-life players. But in the case the brand is responsible for the ESPR compliance, it means the brand will be responsible to create the DPP. But the brand will not ask directly to the raw material producer to write data in the DPP. Most of the time, the brand even don't know the raw material producer. So the big work for the brand is to collect data all along the supply chain in order to create the DPP and fill in the DPP. So as you can see, as manufacturers, you will be impacted by the DPP. And even if you are not under the scope of the regulation and you don't have to create yourself the DPP, brands will ask you for many information in order to write it in the DPP. So next slide, please. So what does it mean for you as manufacturers? So as I said, even if you're not responsible for the compliance and for the creation of the DPP, you will be affected by the ESPR because your customers will need to comply. And it's not only the case for the ESPR, but it's a case for many other regulations. And I'm sure you already face a lot of questions from your customers. So in that case, the brands will need to collect data on their supply chain because they need to better know their supply chain. They need to better know their product. They need to calculate the footprint of their product. They need to improve the way they are using the resources. And most of the time, brands don't have this information, so they will reach out to you. They will need to implement traceability, environmental impact. They will need to work on the durability on their product. And then the brands will need to eco-design their product. They will need to use more sustainable raw material, to use more recycled content, to reduce the use of hazardous chemicals, and they will need to work on the circularity of their product. So they will need your expertise to work on sourcing, to work on the repairability, reusability, recyclability of their product. So next slide, please. So what you can do as manufacturers. So first of all, you need to start to work on this topic right now, on the ESPR, but on all regulatory as well. Because ESPR is coming on 2027 or 28, but it's tomorrow, because this is a very long journey to implement traceability, to calculate the environmental impact of the product. So you have on your side, even if you are not responsible for the compliance, you have to work right now on the topic. The first action you can do is to keep up to date. You can allocate resources to the topic. You can follow the regulations, stay alert. You can onboard your team and you can onboard your supply chain, because you will have to collect data on your supply chain as well. Then you can work on your traceability and your environmental impact, because these two topics are common requirements for many regulations, not only the ESPR, but the CSRD as well, the green claims as well. So This is the first question your customers will ask to you. Yeah, tell me, Kim, you have a question.
No, I am just coming on to in anticipation of handing over to Daniela.
Okay, okay, great. Okay, so you can work on your traceability and your environmental impact. You can identify your needs. You can benchmark tools and implement tools. And then you can work on the circularity. I mean, you can think on how you can help your customers to improve the circularity of their product. They will need your expertise. You got the expertise, so you can be proactive. You can give them advice. Um, the brands will look for partners able to understand the regulation and able to help them to be compliant. So even if you are not directly under the scope of the regulation, you have a very important role to play. And it can be an opportunity for you, an opportunity to secure your current customers and an opportunity maybe to attract new ones. You can turn regulation into a competitive advantage. It's a way for you to showcase your expertise, your actions, and your commitment. So I really encourage you to work on these topics right now. So next slide, please. Here you can find some documentation that can be useful. The first one is the official ESPR text, but I know it's not really easy to read, so you can go directly to the frequently asked question document created by the European Commission. You will find a lot of questions, and it's really interesting and really easy to use. And last information on my last slide. We are organizing a B2B fair dedicated to these topics and dedicated to brands and manufacturers. During this event, you can attend to conferences, to masterclasses, to workshops, and you can meet very qualified exhibitors who are tools helping brands and manufacturers to work on traceability, environmental impact, circularity. So the official communication will start in February, but scanning this QR code, you can register on our website and receive more information in the coming weeks and coming months if you are interested to attend the fair. So this was
Thank
my last
you.
slide, and I hope I was clear enough on the regulatory topic.
Thank you, Maeva. We really appreciate it. There's a lot of questions coming into the Q&A already. And so if there are some that are fairly technical and straightforward, I invite you to just type a response.
Yeah.
But as I said, we'll have the final webinar in February 18th to also get to any questions we didn't get to.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand over to Daniela of Lenzing, who I think will share a bit about Lenzing's practical experience trying to prepare for this piece of legislation. Daniela, over to you.
Thank you. So I know we got now some theoretical support from Maeva, and we know what is the regulation it's about. This is one thing, but from practical perspective, what does it mean for us as manufacturer? We produce fibers, cellulosic fibers, and this is already a big indicator where the impact could be. Yeah, when you heard before, there was a lot of Maeva mentioned that there will be performance requirements and information requirements on durability, recyclability, recycled content, etc. Also some environmental impacts. And here it already starts, yeah. When one thing, what sounds good, yeah, like durability, let's have durable, recyclable product, and in practice, yeah, could mean a lot, because how is durability defined? Is durability defined, let's make the best cashmere top, yeah, or let's make another worse cashmere top, or is it let's go for durability, you know, and let's go for the best possible durability, which would definitely favor synthetic fibers. So if I was manufacturer, I would ask myself, okay, what are the materials I'm dealing with, and what are our main products, and where is my commercial impact? And for us, as a producer of cellulosic fibers, there is a quite heavy commercial impact when it comes to durability requirements, because the way they are defined in a way that they will very much favor, let's say, thick synthetic fabrics. Yeah, they will be the absolute winners, and thin fabrics from natural materials like summer dresses from cotton or from viscose will be the absolute losers. Yeah. So, and cashmere as well. Yeah. So this is already, this, it will have impact on your business, because the way these thresholds for durability are defined, and we all know that durability is, what is durability? There is no standard for durability. This will be like some of different standards, from abrasion resistance to dimensional stability. And in some cases, if you have some gentle materials you deal with, this could even restrict you from placing those products on the European market. So you should know, and you need to know what these requirements are about, and you need to know even details. And right now, how we are preparing, just to show you, we are following, of course, all the work on the ESPR at European, all European Commission's work. There are public consultations on different documents. There is a scientific body within the European Commission that prepares reports that serve as scientific basis. This is right now, this is the second milestone. There will be 3 milestones. The second milestone is right now out to comment, and it's I didn't see any happy. I haven't seen till now, actually, any happy faces about this report. So there is a lot that could have a negative impact on the business. And another thing is recyclability. And you know that there are trade-offs between what durability, recyclability, substances of concern, etc. So yes, how we prepare, as I said, we participate in every single public consultation on ESPR, at least all that we know. And we are trying to increase even transparency within our company and try to somehow digitalize. What does it mean in practice? Is, for example, when you talk about LCA data, we're trying to prepare them on facility level. So that we know for each facility that we have separate data, because they have also different environmental performances. So we are trying to prepare that. And we are also looking at substances of concern. We need to have somehow the full list, classification of chemicals, what percentage is on the product, etc. And we are a fiber producer, we're a chemical industry. So as you can imagine, this is like hell of a work to do. So, and we need to start now. So, as I said, my recommendation to you would be have a look at the details, have a look what are the especially performance requirements, because and information requirements, and try to prepare internally to gather the data, to somehow digitalize the data, so that when your customers are coming, you can transparently share the details, so that they have a confidence that you are a manufacturer, and that you are a manufacturer they can trust. So this would be my proposal. So I already got the info that I should sum up, so I did it.
Thank you, Daniela. We really appreciate it. And last but not least, before we get to the Q&A, and there's so many questions, I'm going to hand over to Iris of Renewne. And Iris, ask you to just share a little bit about your practical experience with the digital product passport and what you would suggest for manufacturers.
Sure. And Kim, hello everyone. I speak, of course, from the technology side of things. So Renoon is a software-based company. Our transparency platform has been following now about 40 companies, especially in Europe, in really preparing and launching the first transparency labels, which were called first, but really are digital product passport solutions. What that means is basically starting from the back end until the front end. So end-to-end, helping companies figure out all of their back end of data and finally to the front end. So a lot of what's happening also for companies that are now structuring their digital product passport solutions. And here we follow both multinational companies, but also on the SME market. So as a manufacturer, if you're serving these two categories of brands, they will all eventually be demanded by digital product passport, by the ESPR registration to comply. So a lot of companies are also launching digital product passport initiatives today to advance and be proactive towards the legislation and get a competitive advantage in the market. And especially also on the consumer side, we really help them launch digital product passport that are easy to understand by consumers. If you go, for example, on a few of our clients' websites, you actually see the digital product passport live as pop-ups within product pages, and already the implementation of NFC tags and QR codes throughout different collections is already happening. And we actually have already today a few clients that are fully live with all the products that have been gone into the market in 2024 with digital product passport. So what does that mean for you being in the back end? So, and also for us. So we, of course, help companies go to the front end piece, but then the front end piece comes by doing all the work in the back end. And with a lot of companies, we've been now tracing and helping them collect data from supply chain, but also connect their digital systems. And basically the actual piece of the digital system and the technicalities when it comes to actually implementing digital product passport open up a few of the questions. The 5 key concerns that we really see when as a platform, what happens is that we basically go to the manufacturer to collect the data, collect data on specific SKU batch level base, and it's also a big opening on what kind of granularity of data will this go into, and that's basically the project that we're currently following the different companies at different granularity levels. But first of all, the key main concern is data availability. So as a manufacturer, will be able, what kind of granularity and what kind of data will you have available, and can you prepare to make that data available? And that is also the main concern that companies and brands have, and that will probably also determine the choice that they're making into selecting their supplier of choice, into what kind of supplier will actually make this data easy and available for me. It's the natural advancement of this, because currently that's also the biggest concern that companies have in this regard. The second, once the data availability has been tackled, it's the data fatigue. So, I mean, many of you have already experienced having to insert the same data in different platforms and basically having different teams and people that are actually spending a lot of their day into inserting data on all these platforms. So that's a big part of the issue as well, that we see happening quite a lot, and we're tackling together with a few of the manufacturers we've been working with. The third is, once this data is being fully managed, is if I give this data into the Renoon platform, who will actually own my data? And so it's the data ownership and sharing. So ensuring that this is happening in a secure way and consistent way that also protects your data ownership. And fourth and fifth are the technological investments. So will you have to invest in further technological infrastructure on your end to probably have API connections with solutions like Renoon to facilitate the data exchange? And fifth is, okay, what is, if I do that and if I spend my time, what is actually the ROI and commercial use? And we've been spending quite a few time now also launching pilots and helping really create tests that can prove that also with manufacturers. Yeah, so that actually sums up my 5 key concerns that Kim we really see when we talk to the supply chain.
Thank you, Iris. All right. We are going to get to the Q&A. There's a lot of questions coming in, and I'm going to kind of direct them. But if anybody on oh, thank you, Macy. If anybody wants to jump in, please feel free to do so. The first question, I'm going to direct this one to Maeva, is who will inspect what products are compliant with ESPR? It's from Joang Matthias. So sorry, who will inspect what products are compliant with ESPR and what products are not? What about all those garments people buy from Shein, Temu, and whatnot?
Yeah, it's a great question, of course. ESPR is a regulation, not a directive. So it means that the implementation can be different in all European countries. So for the moment, as I said, it's a very recent regulation. So a lot of things are still fuzzy. Regarding this question, I answered in the Q&A, but in France, for example, fraud enforcement should be in charge of checking the product, but it can be different in other countries. And for the moment, we don't have specific information on that. But the goal is product like you said, Shein, Temu, and others, because it's not only about fast fashion. The product will came to the customs, and customs will be able to access the data through the DPP, for example, and they will be able to guarantee the compliance of the product. And in the countries, in all the countries, specific organization can be mandated to check products or that are already in the market, like in France, for example, fraud enforcement.
Thank you, Maeva, because I know this question came up, I think, once or twice in the chat.
Yeah.
And I invite all of the other panelists to turn on your videos as well. And if there's anything that you would like to add to Maeva's response, please feel free to jump in. The next question I'm going to throw to the group. Maeva, maybe you can go first, and then I'd be keen to hear from a manufacturer as well. But how can we know that the information, this is also actually a question from Zhuang, but how can we know that the information on a digital product passport is true and reliable? What will be the mechanisms to prevent false information from being inputted into the digital product passport? So I'll start with you, Maeva. I suspect, Iris, you might have a point of view on this question as well, and maybe one manufacturer.
Yeah, because this question is raised about the DPP, but it's the same case for traceability and environmental impact. Today we are trying to collect a lot of information on the supply chain. And the first step is collect the information, because a lot of brands today are not able to collect information on their supply chain. So the first step is that. And after, there is another step, that is the verification of the data. And it means, for the moment, so Iris, you will give more information, I guess, but for the moment, it's a different work. It means you need a third party to verify the data in your company, in your supply chain. So it's not just about information we will gather in the DPP. It's about all information you are collecting on your supply chain.
Yes, correct, Maeva. I think also if to add on top of that is the fact that you really need to separate and also add an infrastructure that can really create that digital trail of where the information was added and when and how, and what kind of proof, and really created in a layered and really stored way. So that's also already the first step of ensuring and understanding and having clarity on the data. And then there's a level of of responsibility that still lies on the actor that actually inputs the data. So throughout all the different like systems that you can actually adopt and create throughout your data collection process to ensure that the data can be indeed validated and verified throughout. Yeah, there's still that level of important responsibility on the actor that is inserting that piece of data.
Thank you, Iris.
I'd just like to add a point
Yes,
to,
thanks,
to
Kavita.
Iris's point that it does depend on the actors. And I think there will be some who will give more detailed data, and I think that will go on to protect them. So I think it would be best for actors to focus on the best that they can give and to ensure that they internally ensure the validity of the traceability or the chain of custody, for example, that they're giving, and try and go, my recommendation would be try and go for the best certifications that are possible, which are third-party verified, which also possibly include the social aspect, like for example, the GRS, as opposed to maybe, the RCS even, so go for the better certifications as far as possible, and have a system within like as a supplier within the company to have the resources to be able to actually understand what these certifications are, how do you check the validity of them, and there will be certain minimums that brands will be telling. In our experience, brands have already started working with DPP providers, for example, and they are setting out their minimum requirements, and those are only going to increase as we go along. The granularity of that is going to increase. So the more work we do back end as suppliers, the better for us.
I just quickly to add, Kim, to that, I think, we often go toward this notion that there's bad actors in the value chain that are putting in false data, right? And the truth of the matter is that neither good actors nor bad actors can actually define and benchmark the data that is even possible today, because we don't have any uniformity with respect to boundaries of that data collection and the methodology of that data collection. So, this is the big fight over the PEF ultimately, that everybody is involved in to some extent. I know the Lenzing folks are, I know that I'm sure the flax folks are, as well as the cotton folks that we tend to work with. And, we have such a long way to go. And perfection is not the goal, but certainly some sort of, let's call it tangible, measurable framework needs to be built by this industry and or collectively by multiple industries, so that we're actually measuring apples to apples and not apples to oranges, if you will, to suit our needs as suppliers, right? Because the multitude is huge. I know suppliers say, oh, we'll just give reporting from our one facility that has solar panels and a water discharge effluent cleaning system, but the other 7 facilities that we work in, we're just going to produce that product under that facility. At the same time, the brands play those same games. So we need some way to benchmark the data that's in the system and assume that actors are incentivized to put in good data insofar that they can, rather than take this idea that actors are by default playing games.
Thank you, Crispin. I mean, I think that you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? This is the elephant in the room. And related to that, there's two related questions that have come into this related to this conversation that I'm going to throw out. One is from Matthew, and his question is, how is the industry capable of validating hundreds of billions of items of data and SKUs for products? And the next question is, from Charlie, does anyone, hang on, there's questions coming in too fast. It's going off screen. The question is, does any of you have any idea how much it will cost to verify every data we collect along the supply chain for a single order and or a single style or item? Daniela, I see you smiling. Is that because you want to answer this, or and there's
no, it's as I said, we are fiber producer. We are in the very beginning of the value chain, and yeah, but I understand. Yeah, I understand how many we, or it's already difficult for to define everything for our fibers, and but you know how many styles are made from these fibers. This is like, yeah, it's not even comparable. So I know, yeah, I know. This is the main question, especially for small enterprises. If big players struggle, yeah, how will smaller manufacturers be able to do that? I don't know. Nobody knows.
Do any of the others? Yeah, Kavita, you look like you want to say.
Yeah, so definitely the cost, that is the point that pinches the most, isn't it? It's the cost for the resources, it's the cost for the better materials, it's the cost for the certified better materials, chain of custody and all of that. And at the moment, like someone said in one of the forums, and that's stuck in my head, and that is suppliers are subsidizing fashion. So there has to be a point where brands start, sharing in that ability to deliver for them, because they are putting the product in the market. And there are a couple of our brands, our customers, who started doing things like, if you have a better Higgs score for a certain facility, they will pay a slightly higher price for that product. So that, for the first time, has started happening, where brands are also trying to see how they can support. So some brands are giving grants which you can apply for financial assistance, and others are beginning to try to see how they can pay a little bit more without really paying too much more, and that gap is still huge. So there is that concern about cost.
We've run studies for several studies at Sourcery with respect to cotton premiums in the market. And if you look at it purely from the lens of preferred fibers, it ranges anywhere from around 4 cents a kg of fabric to up to 50 cents a kg of fabric that is onboarded by the manufacturers, right? 50 cents being your organic regenerative, and 3 cents, let's just say, being your typical BCI costs. And so I think those numbers need to be out in the open, rather than, assumed that they're amortized into the cost of product, because the truth is that they're not amortized into the cost of product. And so we have to have a vehicle through which the real costs are communicated. But it's also important for manufacturers to know that this legislation gives them the upper hand, because as shared by Maeve and a number of other lawyers and other folks, is that the onus, the risk is on the importer. And so that importer is benefiting from an FOB markup price on product that, let's just say it's FOB. Again, I'm interested to understand more of the Incoterm frameworks, but at the same time, we have to build mechanisms in this industry to pay for compliance as the front end, and ultimately pay for positive environmental and social impact, because otherwise it's not going to happen. Let's face it.
Thank you, Crispin. Anybody else on this question, or? Okay.
Maybe just to add something about the verification. Of course, it will be a huge challenge to verify all the products and all the information in the product. But the fact is, we need to start by something, and we need to go step by step. And this regulation and all the regulation in Europe right now will help and force the brands to better know their product and better know their supply chain. And this is the main important point. So yes, it will be difficult to verify all the information and all the product, but we need to start right now because it's really urgent.
And we have the technology to do that at scale and rapidly. We have artificial intelligence, the big word of 2024. It's the electricity of our generation. Let's just call it that. And it will change every element of our lives, as we know. But again, we do banking without a third party. We trust the money that's sent back and forth. We can use big data to leverage verification in a new way that creates new value for this industry and new value for the players that are involved. And we're not thinking like that at all. We're thinking still in the form of insurance and risk rather than actual impact.
So there's a question related from Stephanie in the chat, and I want to put this to some of the manufacturers, what your experience is with this question, because I know from my own conversations with manufacturers that it's a very hot topic. Oh, hang on, I lost the question. Oh, yes. There are so many traceability solutions on the market. Would there be any requirements or regulations against this in the future, or what factors should we consider when we select a traceability solution? So we'll hear, I don't know, who can I? Yes, Maeva, I'll come to you, but I want to hear first, Daniela, maybe you can speak. Have you guys within Lenzing looked at this at all, and what have been the things that you've considered?
You mean traceability solution in terms of blockchain or physical traceability? Because also there you can mark your materials also to be physically traceable. So yes, we work with some providers of blockchain technology, but on the other side, for digital product passport provider, right now there was open consultation on what should be the requirements for digital product passport provider. So it's not really clearly defined who will be accepted and who not. So we don't know actually which one, or maybe we will need to work with more of them. I don't know. We are also looking. It's also open question for us which to select, because nobody has an easy answer to that.
Thank you. And then Maeva and Iris, if there's anything you want to add, you are also most welcome.
Yeah, because of course there are a lot of traceability tools and a lot of DPP tool and a lot of environmental calculation, impact calculation tools. So this is a big choice, and one tool can be the best one for a company, but not the best one for another company. So the first step is to identify your needs. What is traceability for you? What do you need to do with this tool? And so this is the real first step. And after, with that, you can benchmark the different tools, because you can use several tools. One for digital traceability, one for physical traceability. You can need to implement a traceability tool with an impact tool or other tool. If you are selling to a US, you need to comply with UFLPA, and maybe all traceability tools are not able to help you on this point. So the first step is really to identify your needs for traceability and for all other subjects before to start working with a tool.
Thank you, Maeva. Macy, I'm going to ask you to put the final slide on the screen with the QR codes as we wrap up the Q&A. And while you do that, Gori, and then Iris, if you'd like, you're most welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I agree with what Maeva also said. It's very challenging also because these tools are quite expensive. There's like a subscription fees year on year, which can be, we were talking about cost earlier. So the strategy that we adopted at Shahi was that we identified what is our immediate need, and that was UFLPA and UFLA compliance to start with. Then looked at tools that can help us meet that requirement. But our realization was that, I think something we were talking about earlier, is each brand already has their own tool where we have to input data. So then if we adopt one, and then we all have to like integrate with their tools anyway. So the first step for us was to create something internally that works for the organization for forced labor compliance. And eventually we can integrate that into all the third-party tools, or just use that to at least have some unified platform internally, which can feed information into brand tools. This is something that we're still working on. It's at like a pilot stage, and then we'll keep building on it. There's even tools, out there, AI-based risk screening for forced labor. Those are also like $100,000 a year. So there's obviously all of these options on the table, but I agree, you have to start somewhere with maybe the most pressing need and keep building on that. So that's the approach that we've taken, and we're still in the trial stages.
Thank you, Gori. Iris, and I'm going to invite everyone don't forget to register for the final webinar in February. On the 18th of February, that's when we'll be going through all of the questions from all of the webinars that we didn't get to, and we'll have all of the expert speakers. So that really is a chance to just kind of do one big Q&A dump. But Iris, any final thoughts from you or from any of the other speakers? And I'm sorry that we didn't get to all of the questions, but we'll get to them. We'll come back to them on the 18th of February.
Yeah, the last, I think, keyword to mention here is interoperability. So really ensuring that the tools that, you're adopting, either you're building, as Gloria was saying, internally, or adopting externally, they can actually then connect further on. So it's not something that you get and you invest in as a one-off, but actually they can connect through APIs. So potentially, as Gloria was mentioning, sending those data to different other tools. If the companies and the brands that are coming in, they're utilizing other tools, and there is this exchange. So also platforms like reports and Codes 361 in all different ways. I think we're here to actually facilitate all of this transition. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Iris. Any final thoughts? I know Daniela already had to hop off, but if there are any final words or thoughts from any of the other panelists, you are most welcome. There's no obligation.
There's one thing I'd like to just say, that everybody has to start somewhere, and I think get your data together. So that, just be clear about sort of almost little boxes of data that you need. So that there's your supply chain, know your supply chain, know your materials. You have to start there first. And once you have all of your data, the various certifications or the chain of custody for your materials, your ethical audits for your facilities, for example, technical audits, have a place to gather all of this and keep it, because whatever be the platforms you need to feed into or connect to, basically you need to have your data first. And if you have all your data in one place, then it'll be a lot less daunting to connect to the various platforms and suppliers. And of course, you can go to greater granularity as you go along. Some of it will be based on what each customer is asking for, but the basic thorough data transparency and traceability for your supply chain and your materials is really important as a starting point.
Okay. Thank you, Kavita. With that, I want to thank all of the panelists and the speakers here today for coming and sharing your expertise and your practical experience. It's extremely valuable. And thank you to all of the attendees for taking an hour out of your day to be here with us. And we hope to see you in February, where we'll really spend an entire session only on Q&A. So thank you very much, and until February. Bye-bye.